is Joanne Dunbar, and I am doing my discussion for Module 4. And so I'm just going to dive right in and talk about the first prompt, which is how are proper nutrition, sleep, and exercise related to literacy learning? So I think the best way to approach this question is to look at what we found in this module for the Tracy and Morrow text, which was social learning perspective. So according to sociolinguistics, in the Tracy and Morrow text on page 117, these perspectives emphasize the central role of social interaction in the development of knowledge and learning. And then taking that a step farther on page 118, and once again I'm working from the second edition, so my page numbers might be different from yours. It says the ability to read is related to social functioning. That is, that individuals learn to read as a means to accomplish personal goals related to basic life functioning. So we can kind of see the intersection of nutrition, exercise, physical activity, all of these things. And reading is just a means to be able to better execute these functions according to sociolinguistic theories. So that kind of, I think, sets the stage for this chapter. That kind of talks about especially interpersonal relationships and how literacy is fostered through those, which I will talk about more in the third question. But for now, I'm going to skip to the second question, which is what constitutes effective vocabulary instruction. I'm going to start by touching on the article by Bromley, which is vocabulary instruction. So this article focuses a good bit on, let me get back to this, okay, roots, prefixes, and suffixes, which also another article focuses on, which I'll talk about in a second. But it says in this text, language proficiency grows from oral to written competence. So first of all, being able to orally identify the different prefixes and break down words even orally will translate into that written recognition of vocabulary. And then it goes on to say, students with large vocabularies tend to be articulate and possess confidence that is sometimes not exhibited by students who lack vocabulary and conceptual knowledge. So that's just kind of reiterating the importance of vocabulary instruction. And it gives some suggestions for further building vocabulary knowledge and proficiency, including talking over the students' heads, meaning maybe using some vocabulary that they're not super comfortable with or familiar with, but just in doing that, once again, that oral use will translate into written knowledge as they become more familiar with things. Also, small group discussions and oral presentations are another way to kind of put vocabulary strategies to use. And then using word associations. So it says in this article, words are learned because of associations that connect the new with the unknown. So kind of taking a word or even a part of a word and comparing it to a word that is known. So like let's say that there's a word that is not known. You can break it down and then look at the parts and compare it to a word that is known. We say, well, we know that in this word, the prefix, I'm trying to think of an example. The prefix un means not or opposite. So we can safely assume that in the unknown word, it means the same thing. And so that kind of incorporates schema theory as well. Also activating prior knowledge through use of things like KWL charts is effective. And then an interesting statistic from this Bromley article was that 75% of the most frequently used words have multiple meanings. And so that's definitely one to keep in mind as well. I know in my own vocabulary instruction, when we learn a new word and there's multiple meanings, I try to give students multiple opportunities to use the different meanings of that word. And context clues is definitely a big factor in helping students discern those multiple meanings. And so once again, going back to the word parts, from this article, it says meanings of 60% of multisyllabic words can be inferred by analyzing word parts. So creating word trees was one thing that it suggested. I know in another school that I worked at, we used the website Membean, which is a vocabulary website. There's a free version, a paid version. So actually the school that I was at paid for the full version, but even the free version had a thing where you could go on and look up a word and you could see the tree, the word tree with the root and then the different uses of the word or uses of that root. And so that was kind of a cool visual for students to use. Vocabulary notebooks were another example. Illustrate, paraphrase, definition, use in a sentence. So that kind of reminded me of the Frayer model. So like a notebook version of a Frayer model, like maybe you could have a notebook full of Frayer models, kind of like an interactive notebook. You can do different activities, paste in a Frayer model, things like that. I'm going to, another idea that I got from this article was talking about creatively teaching, like giving students ideas for how to creatively teach. So I was thinking maybe do a flipped classroom would be fun. I might try to do that one unit in my vocabulary instruction. So assign a student a word or a few words and say you're in charge of teaching the class these words and see what they come up with. I think that would be a cool way to do it. Okay, so I'm just going to go right into the article. Let me just make sure I'm getting the title right. Morphological Awareness for Adolescents by Hendricks and Griffin. So from this article, it was mostly talking about the morphological side of vocabulary instruction. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of points made there. On page 56, it states, for 4th, 6th, and 5th, and 8th graders, for 4th, 6th, and 8th graders, morphological awareness made a moderate contribution to word and pseudo-word reading controlling for phonological awareness, orthographic knowledge, and rapid automatized naming. So talking about a study that they did, but that really did make a big difference. And so then on page 57, it outlines some best practices for morphological instruction. The first one is explicit instruction in morphological strategies. So talking about roots and their meanings, prefixes and suffixes, doing analogies is kind of what I was talking about earlier, comparing the known to the unknown, and then going whole to part. So starting with the whole and breaking it down into parts. And then number 2, authentic text-based morphological tasks, which includes vocabulary instruction with text sets and something like an online etymology dictionary. So those are some things that it suggests for those authentic text-based tasks. So from there, I'm going to move on to the third question, which was, what implications does research on teacher-student relationships have for literacy learning? And so for this, I'm going to tie back into the Tracy and Morrow text, back into the social learning perspectives chapter, specifically with sociocultural theory. So they start by kind of setting up this perspective in terms of the different systems. The microsystem, which is the immediate environment, such as home and classroom. And so those are the personal relationships. And this is the most, it says the innermost level of influence that has an effect on a student's learning. The mesosystem is the interaction between the two microsystems. So like the intersection of home and school. And then the macrosystem is kind of the bigger local, national, and worldwide events, it says on page 123. So the bigger picture of the bigger society. And these are kind of the spheres, the mediums, if you will, through which children learn and develop. So understanding, first of all, that these environments have a lot of influence on a child, and the home and school environment being the biggest level of influence. Definitely, first of all, kind of shows the grave, that's not the right word, critical role of relationships between teachers and students. Let's see. Additionally, here we go. This is what I was looking for on the bottom of page 123 in the second edition of Tracy and Morrow. This is the quote from Cece. I'm going to pronounce his name that way. Says, interpersonal relationships, including even microprocesses in the parent-child relationship, did not exist in a social vacuum, but were embedded in the larger social structures of community, society, economics, and politics. Urey maintained that a person's development is the product of a constellation of forces, cultural, social, economic, and political, not merely physiological ones. So for, just first to understand that the relationship between a teacher and the child is not just one tiny facet of the child's life, but kind of is part of the whole bigger picture that is contributing to that child's development. Furthermore, on the section on social constructivism, starting at the bottom of page 127, talking about Vygotsky. Yes. This is a quote from Woolfolk, and he says, whereas Piaget described the child as a little scientist constructing an understanding of the world largely alone, Vygotsky suggested that the cognitive development depends much more on interactions with the people in the child's world and the tools that the culture provides to support thinking. Children's knowledge, ideas, attitudes, and values develop through interactions with others. So that kind of just gives it to you straight right there that according to Vygotsky's social constructivism, students learn primarily through their relationships with others, and it's through those relationships that they learn to make meaning of the world, and I guess through those relationships that act as a catalyst for them learning. And I think this has an important tie-in to some of the other theories that we've talked about, such as family literacy, just emphasizing the important role of family relationships, that the school and family home realm are not complete separate entities, but that they directly affect one another. So that is it for my video. I made it a lot shorter this time than the last one, which is good. So thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to discussing with you further.